In the deepest chambers of forgotten temples, whispers echo through corridors that haven't heard footsteps for millennia. Ancient voices, preserved in stone and clay, speak of doorways that should never be opened. Mesopotamian tablets describe travelers who descended into sacred caves and emerged ... different. Celtic druids sang haunting ballads of warriors who followed glowing lights underground, only to vanish into legends themselves. These weren't fairy tales told around campfires. They were warnings, carved with trembling hands by those who witnessed something beyond comprehension. Picture torches casting dancing shadows on limestone walls, their flames revealing symbols that predate written history. Imagine the final echoes of footsteps disappearing into darkness, never to return. From the Andes to the Himalayas, from Australian Dreamtime to Norse sagas, every ancient culture speaks of the same terror, hidden gates to other worlds. But what if these weren't myths at all? What if our ancestors were desperately trying to tell us something we're still too afraid to hear? The year was 1872 when British archaeologist George Smith first translated the Babylonian tablets that would shatter everything scholars thought they knew about ancient civilizations. Hidden within the Epic of Gilgamesh, buried beneath layers of heroic poetry, lay something far more disturbing. References to gates of the earth and passages to the realm of shadows weren't metaphorical flourishes. They were geographical descriptions. Smith's trembling hands traced cuneiform symbols that depicted actual locations. Mountains with specific peaks, rivers that still flowed in modern Iraq, and beneath them all, cave systems that the ancients feared to name directly. But Smith's discovery was just the beginning. In 1922, Howard Carter's team was clearing debris near Tutankhamun's tomb when they found something that never made it into official reports. Limestone fragments bearing hieroglyphs that described doorways beneath. The sacred mountain where souls pass between the world of the living and the eternal. Darkness. The fragments showed detailed maps of underground passages, complete with warnings written in red ochre. Let no man follow the stone serpent's path. These weren't isolated incidents. Across the Mediterranean, archaeologists began uncovering a pattern so consistent it defied coincidence. In Crete, linear tablets discovered in 1935 contained repeated references to the deep places where gods walk among mortals. The Minoan civilization, renowned for their advanced engineering, had apparently built elaborate warning systems around certain cave entrances. Excavations revealed bronze gates, their surfaces covered in symbols depicting human figures entering caves as men and emerging as twisted, elongated shadows. The pattern spread beyond the ancient world's traditional boundaries. In 1947, shepherd Muhammad Ithdib discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran's caves. While the world celebrated finding biblical manuscripts, a handful of fragments remained classified for decades. These texts described the 70 gates of the underworld and provided detailed instructions for sealing the passages that Belial uses to corrupt the earth. The scrolls weren't just theological documents. They were operational manuals for cave exploration and containment. Archaeological evidence painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The ancients hadn't simply feared caves, they had actively worked to seal them. In Turkey's Derinkuyu underground city, archaeologists found massive stone wheels designed to block specific tunnels from the inside. But unlike typical defensive mechanisms meant to keep invaders out, these barriers were clearly intended to keep something in. Chemical analysis revealed that the stones had been sealed with a mixture of clay, blood, and an unknown organic compound that still defied identification. Persian cuneiform tablets from Persepolis described elaborate rituals performed by the Magi, the ancient fire priests at cave entrances throughout the empire. These weren't burial ceremonies or seasonal celebrations. They were containment protocols. The tablets detailed specific chants, protective amulets, and sacrifice sequences designed to maintain the barriers between the realm of Ahura Mazda and the dwelling places of the Devas. Each discovery raised more questions than it answered. Why had the Sumerians developed an entire vocabulary for describing cave-related supernatural phenomena? Their word Abzu, typically translated as freshwater ocean, literally meant house of wisdom beneath the earth. But wisdom wasn't the only thing they believed dwelt in those depths. Clay tablets from Ur described the Abzu as the place where the Watchers dwell, neither in heaven nor upon the earth, but in the spaces between. Roman engineers, master builders of their age, had documented hundreds of cave systems throughout the empire, but their maps contained peculiar notations. Certain caves were marked with symbols indicating non-ingredients, do not enter. Military reports from Germania described legions that had discovered cave networks, extending far beyond what natural geology could explain. Entire cohorts had been reassigned from cave mapping to cave sealing, their original mission abandoned without official explanation. The evidence wasn't limited to written records. Archaeological teams working in southern France discovered cave paintings in Lascaux that predated the famous animal drawings by thousands of years. These earlier images, found in deeper chambers, accessible only through narrow passages, showed human figures entering cave mouths, depicted as gaping maws with teeth. The paintings used a distinctive red pigment that contained traces of meteoric iron material that would have been incredibly rare and difficult to obtain, suggesting these warnings were considered vitally important. Carbon dating revealed something even more unsettling. Cave paintings with identical themes appeared across continents at roughly the same historical periods. Cro-Magnon artists in Europe, Aboriginal peoples in Australia, and Paleo-Indians in North America had all independently chosen to depict humans entering caves and emerging transformed. The consistency suggested either remarkable cultural diffusion across impossible distances or shared experiences that transcended geography. Modern excavation techniques revealed that many ancient settlements had been deliberately constructed to avoid certain cave systems, even when those locations would have provided superior defensive positions or water access. Geological surveys showed that primitive peoples had possessed surprisingly accurate knowledge of subsurface cave networks, carefully positioning their communities to maintain specific distances from particular underground formations. The ancients knew something about caves that we were only beginning to understand, and everything they left behind suggested one terrifying conclusion. Some knowledge was meant to stay buried, but buried knowledge has a way of surfacing when least expected. Deep in the Ajanta caves of Maharashtra, India, a Buddhist monk's trembling chisel carved the final warning before he sealed himself inside Chamber 23 forever. The year was 462 CE, and his message, discovered 15 centuries later, would chill archaeologists to the bone. The door beneath the lotus opens for 7 days. I have seen what waits beyond. Let no soul follow. The monk's sacrifice was not unique. Across continents and cultures, artists had documented the same terrifying truth in stone, desperate to preserve warnings for future generations before they themselves vanished into the very depths they depicted. Consider the petroglyphs of Utah's Newspaper Rock, where ancient Pueblo peoples carved hundreds of symbols across 800 years. Most depict hunting scenes, seasonal ceremonies, and tribal histories, but carved deeper than the rest, using harder tools that left distinctive groove patterns, are images that archaeologists call the descent sequence. Human figures are shown entering spiral symbols representing caves, their forms becoming increasingly distorted with each successive panel until they emerge as elongated shadows with too many limbs. The Pueblo weren't alone in their obsession. In Peru's Nazca region, geoglyphs visible only from above include patterns that perfectly mirror underground cave networks. But these aerial drawings contain an element that defies explanation. Human figures positioned at cave entrances, their arms raised not in celebration but in clear warning gestures. Ground-penetrating radar has confirmed that the accurately maps subterranean passages that extend far deeper than any natural cave system should exist at that altitude. The ancient Maya went even further in their stone testimonies. Beneath the Temple of Inscriptions, archaeologists discovered carved panels that weren't part of the famous tomb of Pakel the Great. These hidden reliefs, accessible only through a narrow passage that had been deliberately filled with rubble, show sequences of humans entering sacred cenotes, natural sinkholes that the Maya considered gateways to Xibalba, the underworld. But unlike typical Maya art celebrating communication with ancestors, these carvings depict pure terror. Human figures emerge from the cenotes, transformed into creatures with elongated skulls and extra appendages. Their mouths open in silent screams. Mayan codices, discovered in private collections, contain references to the 7 entrances that must never open together, and describe elaborate calendar calculations designed to predict when the barriers grow thin. These weren't astronomical observations but geological warnings. Tracking seismic activity that might weaken cave barriers, the Maya had spent centuries reinforcing with massive stone plugs. European megalithic sites reveal similar obsessions. At Newgrange in Ireland, the famous passage tomb contains inner chambers covered in spiral carvings that archaeologists traditionally interpret as solar symbols. But recent analysis using advanced imaging techniques has revealed hidden layers beneath the visible spirals, detailed maps of local cave systems with specific markings indicating dangerous passages. The Celtic builders hadn't created a solar observatory. They had constructed an elaborate warning system. Disguised as a temple, stone circles throughout. Britain and Ireland follow a pattern that becomes clear only when overlaid with geological surveys of underground cave networks. The circles weren't positioned for astronomical observations, but to mark safe distances from cave entrances. Excavations at these sites consistently reveal layers of ash, suggesting regular burning rituals designed to purify the boundaries between the upper and lower worlds. The Picts of Scotland left perhaps the most disturbing stone testimonies. Their symbol stones, scattered across the highlands, contain recurring motifs that have puzzled historians for centuries. The Pictish beast with its elongated snout and curved appendages wasn't mythological artwork, it was documentary evidence. Stone carvings at sites like Aberlemno show these creatures emerging from clearly defined cave mouths, while human figures flee in obvious terror. Chemical analysis of the stone surfaces reveals that these carvings were originally painted with pigments mixed with human blood, suggesting they were considered sacred warnings of the highest importance in Norway's Finnmark region. Sami shamanic petroglyphs dating to 4000 BCE show detailed sequences of human transformation. The rock art depicts shamans entering specific cave formations and emerging with additional shadow forms attached to their bodies. These aren't spiritual metaphors, but precise documentations of physical changes. The Sami word, stalu, still used today to describe malevolent cave-dwelling entities, appears in their oldest oral traditions with geographical specificity that matches the petroglyph locations exactly African rock art provides. Perhaps the most extensive stone archive of cave-related warnings in the Tassili, Najor Plateau. Paintings hidden in remote gorges show human figures entering cave systems and emerging with their proportions fundamentally altered. The artists used different pigments for the transformed figures. A distinctive blue-black compound that contains minerals not naturally occurring in the region. Geological analysis suggests these minerals could only have been obtained from deep underground sources, implying the artists had direct experience with cave exploration. Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime paintings in Arnhem Land depict the hungry earth as cave mouths, with human figures being drawn inside by serpentine entities called rainbow serpents. But these aren't mythological creatures. The paintings show anatomically precise depictions of cave formations throughout northern Australia, complete with accurate cross-sections of underground water systems and chamber layouts. The Aboriginal peoples had mapped extensive subterranean networks and incorporated specific warnings about certain passages into their most sacred artistic traditions. The consistency of these stone warnings across isolated cultures suggests something far more disturbing than coincidental mythology. In Easter Islands, Moai statues, recently discovered underground chambers contain petroglyphs that the Rapa Nui people never intended for surface dwellers to see. These hidden carvings show human figures entering cave systems through the island's volcanic tubes and emerging with elongated limbs and distorted facial features. The Rapa Nui had carved warnings about their own island's geology into stone chambers they then sealed and buried beneath massive statues. Perhaps most chilling are the deliberate attempts to destroy these stone warnings throughout history. Conquering civilizations systematically targeted cave-related artwork for destruction. Roman legions in Gaul specifically sought out Celtic sacred groves where cave warnings had been carved into ancient oaks, burning entire forests to eliminate the testimony. Early Christian missionaries in Ireland and Scotland made destroying Pictish symbol stones a priority, often building churches directly over the sites where cave warning markers had stood. The Spanish conquistadors in Peru showed particular zeal for destroying Incan quipus. Knotted string records that contained geographical information about underground passages. Surviving fragments, hidden in remote mountain temples, continue to provide location data for cave systems that modern speleologists are only beginning to map. These weren't campaigns against paganism. They were systematic attempts to eliminate specific knowledge about underground dangers. The conquerors knew something that made preserving certain ignorance more important than preserving cultural heritage. But stone endures where flesh fails, and the warnings carved by desperate hands continue to surface from beneath centuries of deliberate burial. The question remains: why were so many willing to risk their lives to carve warnings they knew might be suppressed or destroyed? What had they seen in those depths that made preserving the testimony more important than preserving their own safety? The stones remember what we have chosen to forget. Beneath the bustling streets of modern Istanbul, maintenance workers drilling for a new subway line broke through into something that wasn't supposed to exist. The year was 2013, and what they discovered 30 feet below the surface would force archaeologists to rewrite everything they thought they knew about underground construction capabilities in the ancient world. The passage stretched beyond their headlamps' reach, carved from solid bedrock with precision that defied explanation. The walls bore tool marks consistent with Bronze Age implements, yet the tunnel's dimensions and engineering exceeded anything Bronze Age peoples should have been capable of creating. More disturbing still were the massive stone barriers blocking the passage at regular intervals, one weighing several tons, designed to be sealed from the upper side only. Someone had built this tunnel system to be permanently closed from above. The Istanbul discovery wasn't isolated. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted across Europe and Asia during the past 2 decades have revealed vast underground networks that predate known civilizations by thousands of years. These aren't natural cave formations carved by water erosion over geological time. They're engineered passages, constructed with mathematical precision and featuring architectural elements that suggest their builders possessed advanced knowledge of structural engineering, acoustics, and underground ventilation systems. In Romania's Busagi Mountains, hikers in 2003 discovered an entrance to what local authorities initially dismissed as natural caves. Subsequent exploration revealed galleries extending over 30 kilometers through solid granite, connected by perfectly circular shafts that descend to depths still unmeasured. The passages contain carved niches sized precisely for human torches, suggesting regular use by ancient peoples. But the galleries also feature massive bronze doors, green with verdigris, that can only be opened from the surface side. Why build doors in tunnels that lead nowhere, unless they don't lead nowhere? Egyptian papyrus documents from Pharaoh Amenhotep II's reign described the Great Sealing undertaken by royal engineers around 1400 BCE. The texts detail elaborate underground construction projects beneath the Giza Plateau, involving thousands of workers who were reportedly sworn to secrecy upon pain of death. Modern seismic surveys have confirmed the existence of extensive artificial chambers beneath the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. But access attempts have been consistently blocked by Egyptian authorities, citing structural safety concerns. What remains hidden beneath Egypt's most famous monuments? The papyrus documents provide disturbing clues. They describe chambers containing the watchers in their stone houses and reference elaborate rituals performed by priests who feed the sleepers. Their dreams of blood. These weren't metaphorical. Descriptions of burial chambers. The language used is technical, describing specific procedures for maintaining seals on underground passages that the Egyptians believed led to other worlds. Chinese historical records from the Han Dynasty describe similar underground construction projects throughout the empire's western provinces. The Earth Dragon tunnels mentioned in imperial archives weren't military fortifications but elaborate passage systems designed to contain what the Chinese called Hun, gooey restless spirits that emerged from deep earth. Archaeological surveys in China's Xinjiang province have located entrances to these tunnel systems, many still sealed with massive stone plugs bearing official imperial warnings. By order of the Son of Heaven, let no man disturb the sleep of the earth. The Han Dynasty. Engineers had apparently inherited these tunnel systems from even earlier civilizations. Carbon dating of organic materials found in the passages suggests construction dates extending back over 4,000 years, during periods when the technological sophistication required for such projects shouldn't have existed among any known cultures in the region. In Peru's Andes Mountains, Spanish colonial records describe encounters with underground passages that the Incas had sealed using techniques their conquistadors couldn't understand or replicate. The Spanish called them las cuevas del diablo, the devils caves, and documented numerous attempts to break through Incan seals in search of gold. According to colonial archives, expeditions that managed to penetrate the barriers often returned with fewer members than they'd entered with. Survivors reported passages that seemed to extend beyond the physical boundaries of the mountains themselves, and encounters with stone guardians that moved in the darkness. Modern archaeological investigations in Peru have confirmed the existence of these sealed passages. Ground-penetrating radar reveals tunnel networks that extend through multiple mountain ranges, connecting sites hundreds of kilometers apart. The engineering required to construct such systems would challenge modern capabilities. Yet the Incas apparently not only built them, but also developed sophisticated methods for permanently sealing specific sections. Why seal passages you had built for access? The answer may lie in Incan oral traditions preserved by isolated Quechua communities. These stories describe the time when the mountains bled darkness, and tell of ancient engineers who built roads for the spirits of the deep earth, then realized their mistake and spent generations undoing their work. The underground construction wasn't limited to major civilizations. In Scotland's Orkney Islands, recent excavations have revealed passage systems that predate Stonehenge by over 1,000 years. These tunnels, carved from solid sandstone, connect various Neolithic sites across multiple islands. But unlike typical underground construction designed for human movement, these passages feature sections that are deliberately too narrow for adult humans, yet perfectly sized for something else. Tool marks on the walls suggest the passages were widened in some areas and narrowed in others, as if ancient engineers were constantly modifying the tunnels to control what could move through them. The Orkney passages also feature acoustic properties that amplify sound in specific directions. Whispers spoken at certain locations can be heard clearly throughout the entire tunnel system, while sounds from the surface are completely muted. The builders had created underground communication networks that operated independent of surface conditions. Yet they had also incorporated features designed to prevent anything from navigating the full passage system without detection. Archaeological evidence suggests these tunnel networks were abandoned suddenly. Excavations consistently reveal layers of ash and burned materials sealing passage entrances, often mixed with organic compounds that chemical analysis identifies as human blood. The abandonment wasn't gradual decline due to changing circumstances. It was deliberate, urgent, and involved considerable sacrifice. In Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, cenote diving expeditions have discovered submerged passages connecting natural sinkholes across hundreds of kilometers. While some of these connections are natural, others show clear evidence of artificial modification and expansion. Maya engineering had transformed natural cave systems into vast underground networks, complete with carved chambers, ritual platforms, and massive stone barriers, positioned at strategic choke points. The Maya had called these modified systems the roads of Xibalba and developed elaborate calendar systems for predicting when passages should be sealed or opened. Modern exploration has revealed that many sections remain blocked by Maya engineering that divers still cannot penetrate or understand. The barriers appear to be designed not just to prevent physical access, but to contain something that the Maya believed could spread through connected underground systems. What emerges from archaeological evidence across continents is a disturbing pattern. Ancient civilizations had possessed both the capability and the urgent motivation to construct vast underground networks, then systematically seal or abandon them. These weren't mining operations, burial systems, or defensive installations. They were containment protocols. The builders had learned something about what dwells in deep earth that made isolation more important than access. Modern engineering continues to break through ancient seals, often accidentally. Each breach reveals more of the networks that our ancestors worked desperately to close. The question becomes increasingly urgent. What did they know that we're rediscovering too late to heed their warnings? The earth remembers what we've forgotten, and it's beginning to speak again through cracks in barriers that were never meant to be broken. Marcus Crassus disappeared in the Syrian desert in 53 BCE, but his death at Parthian hands wasn't the end of his story. Roman historians buried the truth in coded language, speaking of the consul who walked between worlds, and describing his final expedition not as a military campaign, but as something far stranger. Recently discovered papyrus fragments from Antiochus IV's courts describe Crassus's encounter with underground passages near Palmyra, passages that local guides warned led to the realm where shadows eat light. According to the Syrian accounts, Crassus entered those passages with a full cohort and emerged alone. 3 days later, speaking languages that no Roman scholar could identify. He had aged decades in those 3 days, his hair white, his eyes reflecting light like an animal's. The Parthians didn't kill Marcus Crassus, they executed something else wearing his face. Something that had forgotten how to be human. This wasn't mythology. It was testimony preserved by terrified witnesses. Throughout history, explorers who ventured into certain cave systems returned fundamentally changed if they returned at all. Their accounts, dismissed as hallucinations or fabrications, form a consistent pattern that spans cultures and centuries. In 847 CE, the Irish monk Brendan the Navigator documented his encounter with caves beneath the cliffs of Western Ireland. His journal, discovered in the Vatican's secret archives, describes descending into passages that stretched beyond the bounds of God's creation. Brendan wrote of hearing voices speaking in perfect Latin from chambers that his torches revealed to be empty. The voices provided detailed information about events occurring simultaneously in distant monasteries, information that later proved accurate to the day, but the voices demanded payment for their knowledge. Brendan's journal describes shadowy figures that emerged from the cave walls, entities that offered to guide him deeper in exchange for memories of sunlight. The monk fled, but not before one of the entities touched him. For the remainder of his life, Brendan cast no reflection in still water and required others to describe his own appearance. As mirrors showed him only empty space. Chinese imperial records from the Song dynasty contain similar testimonies. General Li Qingzhao led an expedition into the Kunlun Mountains in 1127, tasked with investigating reports of spirit activity in border caves. His official report, classified for 8 centuries, describes discovering passages that defied physical laws. Rooms opened into spaces larger than the mountains that contained them. Corridors led upward yet somehow emerged far below their starting points. Lee's men reported seeing their own reflections, walking independently in polished stone surfaces, making gestures they weren't making, speaking words they hadn't spoken. 3 soldiers from Lee's expedition never emerged from those reflections. They simply stepped through polished surfaces and vanished, leaving their equipment and weapons behind. The men who did return described hearing their missing comrades' voices echoing from stone walls for days afterward. calling for help from inside solid rock. Lee himself returned, with knowledge he couldn't explain, detailed understanding of engineering techniques that wouldn't be developed for centuries. His subsequent military innovations revolutionized Song dynasty siege warfare, but he never revealed their source. Court records note that Lee aged rapidly after the expedition, dying within 2 years despite being in perfect health at his final words, transcribed by court scribes, were spoken in a language that Chinese scholars still haven't identified. European accounts provide equally disturbing testimonies. In 1347, during the height of the Black Death, Brother Francesco of Assisi led a pilgrimage to caves beneath Monte Sabazio, seeking divine intervention against the plague. His letter to Pope Clement VI, hidden in Avignon's archives for over 6 centuries, describes encountering angels of terrible aspect in underground chambers, illuminated by light that cast no shadows. The entities Francesco met possessed detailed knowledge of the plague's spread, predicting its movements across Europe with uncanny accuracy. They offered to halt the disease in exchange for pilgrims who would remain in the deep places, serving as bridges between the world of flesh and the realm of eternal memory. Francesco refused, but not before learning that the plague itself had emerged from similar underground encounters in Central Asia, where Mongol shamans had made different choices. Francesco's letter describes returning to find that no time had passed on the surface, despite spending days in the caves. His fellow pilgrims had no memory of his absence, but Francesco himself bore physical changes. His shadow fell in directions that defied the sun's position, and he could see clearly in complete darkness for the rest of his life. More disturbing, he reported that written prayers would sometimes change their text when he wasn't looking directly at them, as if something was editing his communication with God. Islamic sources provide parallel accounts. Ibn Battuta's true journal, distinct from the sanitized version published during his lifetime, describes his 1354 expedition into Afghan caves while seeking routes to India. The explorer documented encountering jinn of the deep earth, who spoke fluent Arabic and possessed intimate knowledge of his personal history, including events that had occurred after he entered the caves. These entities offered to transport him instantly to any location he desired, demonstrating their abilities by showing him visions of distant cities that proved accurate when he later visited them through conventional travel. But Ibn Battuta noted that the jinn's knowledge came with temporal inconsistencies. They described future events as if they had already occurred, and spoke of past events as if they were still unfolding. Ibn Battuta fled after realizing that the jinn were offering to make him like themselves, existing in all moments simultaneously, but belonging fully to none. His journal records that several members of his caravan accepted the offer and vanished into the cave walls, their voices continuing to provide guidance to the expedition even after their physical disappearance. Modern encounters follow eerily similar patterns. In 1962, Soviet speleologist Viktor Alexandrov led a classified expedition into Siberian caves near the Chinese border. His report, declassified after the Soviet Union's collapse, describes discovering chambers containing technology that defied contemporary understanding. The equipment appeared ancient yet functioned using principles that Soviet scientists couldn't explain or replicate. Alexandrov's team encountered entities that communicated through direct mental contact, providing detailed technical specifications for advanced propulsion systems and energy generation methods. But the knowledge came with a costly. Members who accepted the information found themselves unable to communicate it to others without experiencing severe physical trauma. 3 scientists died attempting to transcribe the technical details. Their bodies found with no apparent cause of death. Alexandrov himself returned with innovations that advanced Soviet space technology by decades, but he never revealed their true source. KGB interviews record his growing obsession with returning to the caves, claiming that the entities continued to contact him through dreams, offering increasingly advanced knowledge in exchange for permanent collaboration. The pattern remains consistent across cultures and centuries. Caves that serve as contact points with intelligences that offer knowledge, power, or transport in exchange for increasingly significant sacrifices. The entities demonstrate capabilities that transcend human understanding, yet they seem bound by rules that prevent them from acting directly in the surface world. They need human cooperation. They need us to choose. Every account describes the same fundamental choice: accept their gifts and become something other than human, or flee and spend the rest of your life knowing that you walked away from transcendence. Most chose to flee. Some didn't, and some, like Marcus Crassus, discovered that the choice wasn't always theirs to make. The caves continue to call, and some still answer. But the question remains, are those who return still entirely themselves? Or are they something else, wearing familiar faces, serving purposes we're not equipped to understand? The encounters continue, hidden in classified reports and dismissed testimonies, but the pattern never changes. The caves offer everything we've ever wanted, and the price is everything we've ever been. The debate that would shape humanity's relationship with the underground began in Alexandria's Great Library around 280 BC, when scholars first attempted to catalogue the growing collection of cave-related testimonies flooding in from across the known world. Eratosthenes, the brilliant mathematician who calculated Earth's circumference, found himself facing accounts that challenged the very foundations of rational thought. Roman expedition reports described passages that led deeper than mountains were tall. Greek merchants told of caves where time moved differently, where travelers aged years in hours or returned younger than when they'd entered. Egyptian priests presented papyrus scrolls, detailing underground encounters with entities that possessed knowledge of astronomical events centuries before they occurred. Eratosthenes faced an impossible choice: dismiss the testimonies and ignore patterns that appeared across isolated cultures, or accept that reality operated by rules that mathematics couldn't yet explain. He chose a third path that would echo through centuries of scholarly debate, careful documentation without judgment. The Alexandrian catalogues, fragments of which survive in private collections today, record testimonies alongside geographical coordinates, witness credibility assessments, and attempts to identify natural phenomena that might explain supernatural claims. But the scholars also noted when natural explanations failed, creating the first systematic approach to investigating claims that transcended conventional understanding. This scholarly tension intensified during Rome's expansion. When military engineers encountered cave systems that violated architectural principles, Roman concrete could support massive domes and aqueducts spanning valleys. Yet engineers consistently refused contracts for projects involving certain underground sites. Military records from Gaul and Germania describe centurions who requested transfers rather than supervise excavations near caves, marked by local peoples as forbidden. The conflict between rational engineering and inexplicable phenomena created the first documented cases of institutional denial. Emperor Hadrian's personal correspondence discovered in Tivoli during Renaissance excavations, reveals his struggle with reports from provincial governors about underground anomalies that threatened imperial expansion. Hadrian, a practical ruler who had personally overseen engineering projects across the empire, found himself authorizing the abandonment of potentially valuable mining sites based on testimonies that defied logical analysis. His letters describe sleepless nights wrestling with accounts of entire cohorts that had vanished into cave systems, leaving behind equipment but no bodies. Military discipline demanded rational explanations, yet rational explanations couldn't account for the fact that some caves produced sounds of marching feet and shouted orders months after the disappearances, as if the lost soldiers continued their duties in dimensions beyond physical reach. Hadrian's solution established a precedent that would influence institutional responses for centuries. Official dismissal combined with practical avoidance. The empire would publicly deny supernatural claims, while privately redirecting resources away from problematic areas. This policy of rational denial with pragmatic accommodation became the template for how civilizations would handle cave anomalies. The rise of Christianity intensified the debate by introducing theological frameworks that could accommodate supernatural encounters while maintaining doctrinal control. St. Augustine's Confessions contains rarely quoted passages describing his investigation of cave phenomena in North Africa. Augustine approached underground anomalies as potential evidence of divine or demonic activity, creating theological categories for experiences that pagan philosophy couldn't address. His framework allowed for supernatural encounters while maintaining that such experiences were either divine tests or demonic deceptions, never autonomous phenomena operating by unknown laws. This theological approach provided believers with conceptual tools for processing cave encounters without abandoning faith in divine order. But it also created new tensions between religious doctrine and direct experience. Augustine's private letters to fellow bishops reveal his growing concern that cave encounters produced religious experiences that couldn't be easily categorized as either divine revelation or demonic temptation. Some cave returned, claiming direct communication with entities that provided theological insights more sophisticated than established doctrine. Others emerged with abilities that seemed miraculous, yet originated from sources that church teaching couldn't clearly identify as divine. Augustine's correspondence shows him struggling with the possibility that reality contained spiritual dimensions that existed independent of Christian cosmology. Islamic scholars faced similar challenges during the Golden Age of Baghdad. El-Ghazali's The Revival of the Religious Sciences contains extensive analysis of underground encounters reported throughout the Islamic world. Al-Ghazali approached cave phenomena as potential evidence of jinn activity, using Quranic frameworks to explain encounters that transcended normal experience. But his private notes, preserved in Cairo's Al-Azhar library, reveal growing uncertainty about whether some cave entities fell within traditional jinn categories or represented something entirely outside Islamic cosmology. The tension between religious frameworks and direct experience created scholarly communities dedicated to investigating anomalous phenomena while maintaining doctrinal orthodoxy. These communities produced the first systematic methodologies for researching supernatural claims without automatic dismissing them as delusion or fraud. Medieval European scholars developed increasingly sophisticated approaches to cave-related investigations, Roger. Bacon's experimental philosophy included protocols for testing supernatural claims using empirical methods. His opus majus describes experiments designed to verify or falsify testimonies about underground anomalies. Bacon's approach treated cave encounters as natural phenomena operating by laws that science hadn't yet discovered, rather than supernatural events that transcended natural law entirely. This methodological shift created the foundation for modern paranormal investigation. Bacon's students developed techniques for documenting cave encounters using multiple independent witnesses, physical evidence collection, and attempts to reproduce anomalous phenomena under controlled conditions. Their work established that many cave-related claims could be verified through empirical investigation, even when the underlying causes remained unexplained. The Renaissance brought new tensions as exploration expanded human knowledge while revealing phenomena that challenged expanding scientific understanding. Leonardo da Vinci's private notebooks contain detailed drawings of cave systems he investigated throughout Italy, including architectural analyses of passages that appeared to violate structural engineering principles. Leonardo approached underground anomalies as engineering problems, attempting to understand how natural processes could produce formations that seemed impossible according to known physics. His notebooks reveal growing fascination with caves that demonstrated properties inconsistent with surrounding geology chambers carved from granite using techniques that left no tool marks, passages that maintained consistent temperatures despite seasonal variations, and acoustic properties that amplified sound in mathematically precise patterns. Leonardo documented these phenomena without supernatural interpretation, treating them as evidence that natural processes operated according to principles that human science hadn't yet discovered. The Enlightenment intensified conflicts between rational skepticism and empirical investigation. Correspondence with Frederick the Great includes discussions of Prussian military reports, describing underground encounters that challenged both religious and scientific worldviews. Voltaire advocated for systematic investigation of supernatural claims using scientific methods, arguing that dismissing testimonies without investigation was as irrational as accepting them without evidence. But Enlightenment investigation of cave phenomena produced results that satisfied neither skeptics nor believers. Empirical research confirmed that many cave-related claims could be verified through multiple witnesses and physical evidence. Yet the underlying causes remained inexplicable according to accepted scientific principles. This created a new category of verified anomalies, phenomena, that could be documented and reproduced but not explained within existing theoretical frameworks. The Industrial Revolution brought technological tools that could measure cave phenomena with unprecedented precision, but increased accuracy only deepened the mystery. Electromagnetic instruments detected energy signatures in certain caves that had no identifiable sources. Photographic equipment captured images of phenomena invisible to human observation. Sound recording devices documented acoustic events that occurred in chambers confirmed to be empty through direct observation. Technology confirmed that cave anomalies were real, measurable phenomena rather than hallucinations or hoaxes. But technological confirmation raised more disturbing questions. If cave encounters were genuine interactions with measurable phenomena, what exactly were people encountering in those depths? The debate between myth and reality had evolved into something more complex and troubling. The recognition that reality itself might be far stranger than either skeptics or believers had imagined. The caves weren't just challenging human understanding. They were revealing that human understanding was more limited than anyone had suspected. The question was no longer whether cave encounters were real, but whether humanity was prepared for the implications of that reality. Across the vast Pacific, separated by thousands of miles of ocean, ancient civilizations developed identical beliefs about underground passages leading to other worlds. The Maya of Guatemala carved intricate reliefs depicting humans entering cenotes sinkholes and emerging transformed. Half a world away, Aboriginal Australians painted nearly identical scenes on cave walls, showing figures descending into rainbow serpent holes and returning with elongated shadows. In Peru's mountains, Incan stonework depicts humans entering cave systems beneath sacred peaks and merging with additional limbs. These weren't cultural exchanges. These civilizations had no contact with each other, yet they independently developed the same terrifying understanding. Certain caves served as doorways between worlds. The Maya called their underground gateways Xibalba B roads to the underworld. But Mayan astronomy reveals that Xibalba wasn't simply a realm of the dead. It was a parallel dimension where different physical laws applied, where time moved independently of surface reality, and where entities existed that could influence events in the upper world. Mayan engineers constructed elaborate systems around sea, not to facilitate access, but to control it. At Chichen Itza, recent underwater exploration of the sacred cenote has revealed structures that archaeologists initially dismissed as natural formations. But computer modeling shows that these natural formations create precise acoustic effects, amplifying sounds from specific depths while muffling others. The Maya had engineered their sacred cenotes to serve as communication systems with whatever dwelt in the deeper passages. Carbon dating of organic materials found in sealed chambers beneath Chichen Itza suggests continuous human activity extending back over 3,000 years, far earlier than any known Maya civilization. The cenotes weren't Maya discoveries. They were Maya inheritances from earlier peoples who had developed even more sophisticated underground technologies. Mayan codices describe elaborate calendar systems for predicting when doors would open naturally, and complex rituals designed to force them open when astronomical conditions weren't favorable. But the same texts detail equally elaborate procedures for sealing passages permanently, suggesting that the Maya had learned through bitter experience that some doors were meant to stay closed. Egyptian tomb architecture reveals similar obsessions with controlling access to underground realms. The Great Pyramid's internal passages weren't designed for burial ceremonies, but for something far more complex. Recent analysis using cosmic ray imaging has revealed hidden chambers that connect to natural cave systems extending deep beneath the Giza Plateau. But these connections include massive granite plugs, some weighing over 15 tons, positioned to block specific passages from the pyramid side. Egyptian papyrus texts describe the pyramid as a jed, a stabilizing force that maintained barriers between the world of the living and the duat, typically translated as underworld, but more accurately meaning the place where different realities intersect. Pyramid texts weren't spells for guiding pharaohs through death. They were operational manuals for maintaining interdimensional stability. The Egyptians inherited their underground knowledge from even earlier civilizations. Texts from the Old Kingdom describe the time of the Neteru, when gods walked openly in Egypt and taught humans to build houses of eternity that could contain those who should not walk in the light of Ra. Archaeological evidence suggests that pyramid construction involved sealing pre-existing underground structures rather than creating new burial chambers. Greek mystery schools developed elaborate philosophical frameworks around similar underground encounters. The Eleusinian mysteries, conducted in caves beneath the temple complex, weren't symbolic death and rebirth rituals, but actual initiation into contact with entities from parallel dimensions. Initiates emerged from the underground ceremonies with knowledge that allowed them to predict future events and communicate across vast distances without physical means. Plato's allegory of the cave wasn't philosophical metaphor but coded description of actual cave encounters. His academy included protocols for underground exploration, and his dialogues contained technical details about cave navigation disguised as abstract philosophy. The famous forms that Plato described existing in perfect reality weren't theoretical constructs, they were entities that Greek explorers had encountered in underground passages. Beings that existed as pure information, unencumbered by physical limitations. Roman engineering encountered similar phenomena throughout the empire's expansion in Britain. Roman legions discovered that Celtic druids had developed sophisticated methods for sealing underground passages that connected to other worlds the Celts called Unwen. Roman military reports describe encounters with Celtic priests who could communicate with entities dwelling in sealed caves, receiving tactical information about Roman troop movements from sources that had no apparent means of surveillance. The Romans attempted to exploit Celtic cave systems for military intelligence, but expeditions that penetrated Druidic seals often returned with fewer members than they'd entered with. Surviving soldiers reported encountering Roman citizens in the caves, people who claimed to be members of expeditions that hadn't yet departed from surface camps, as if the underground passages connected different points in time as well as space. Germanic tribes possessed similar knowledge about underground passages. Tacitus describes Germanic shamans who could speak with the ancestors by entering specific cave systems in the Black Forest. But Roman intelligence reports reveal that these shamanic consultations provided accurate information about contemporary events occurring throughout the empire that Germanic tribes couldn't have obtained through conventional means. The Germanic peoples had developed elaborate taboo systems governing cave access, with different clans responsible for maintaining seals on specific passages. Roman attempts to exploit Germanic cave systems for strategic advantage consistently failed, often resulting in the loss of entire exploration teams who vanished into passages that Germanic guides claimed led to the Wolf's Realm dimensions, where predatory entities hunted anything that entered unprepared in the Americas. Indigenous civilizations across both continents developed remarkably consistent beliefs about underground passages. The Hopi of North America describe emerging into the current world through underground passages from previous worlds that had been destroyed by catastrophe. But Hopi oral traditions aren't creation myths. They're historical accounts of using underground passages to escape surface disasters, complete with geographical landmarks that correspond to actual cave systems throughout the southwestern United States. Hopi ceremonies include detailed protocols for communicating with entities they call ant people who dwell in underground cities and have provided assistance to human refugees throughout multiple historical catastrophes. Recent archaeological discoveries of extensive cave networks beneath Hopi territory confirm the geographical accuracy of traditions that mainstream anthropology had dismissed as mythology. South American civilizations possessed even more sophisticated underground technologies. Pre-Incan cultures in Peru constructed underground tunnel networks that span hundreds of miles, connecting sacred sites across multiple mountain ranges. But these tunnels include features that defy conventional engineering passages that maintain consistent air pressure despite elevation changes that should create significant pressure differentials, and acoustic properties that allow communication across distances that should exceed sound transmission capabilities. Incan oral traditions describe these tunnel systems as inheritance from earlier peoples called Viracocha, typically translated as gods, but more accurately meaning beings from another placetime. The Viracocha had apparently taught human engineers to construct underground passages that could access parallel dimensions where different physical laws applied. Archaeological evidence suggests that these tunnel systems were actively used for interdimensional communication until Spanish conquest disrupted the knowledge transmission systems that enabled safe navigation of passages that connected to other worlds. The pattern across civilizations reveals something far more disturbing than shared mythology. Independent cultures developed identical technologies for accessing parallel dimensions through underground passages, an identical awareness that such access required careful control to prevent catastrophic consequences. Every civilization eventually developed protocols for sealing passages permanently, suggesting that they all learned through experience that some doors between worlds were too dangerous to leave open. The question becomes, what did our ancestors discover in those parallel dimensions that made them willing to abandon potentially transformative technologies in favor of permanent isolation? And what happens now that modern civilization is unknowingly breaking through seals that ancient peoples died to maintain? The caves remember what we've forgotten, and they're beginning to open whether we're prepared or not. In 641 CE, when Arab forces conquered Alexandria, General Amr ibn Alas faced an impossible decision. The great library's final librarians offered him scrolls and codices that they claimed contained knowledge too dangerous for any single people to possess. Maps showing pathways between worlds, technical manuals for constructing interdimensional passages, and detailed records of civilizations that had vanished after delving too deeply into underground mysteries. The librarians begged Amr to burn these particular collections, rather than allow them to fall into any hands, claiming that previous civilizations had destroyed themselves pursuing the knowledge they contained. Amr's letters to Caliph Umar, preserved in Damascus archives, describe his dilemma: destroy potentially invaluable information, or risk unleashing catastrophes that had allegedly consumed entire empires. Historical records suggest Amr chose a third option rather than burning the dangerous texts or keeping them concentrated in one location. He scattered them across the Islamic world, ensuring that no single authority could piece together complete technical specifications for technologies that ancient peoples had deemed hazardous to preserve intact. But fragments survived, hidden in private collections and monastery libraries, waiting for scholars brave or foolish enough to attempt reconstruction. The most significant collection surfaced in 12th century Cordoba, when Andalusian mathematician Ibn Rushd discovered a cache of Greek and Egyptian texts hidden beneath a mosque foundation. Among them were partial copies of Eratosthenes' complete cave surveys, not just the sanitized geographical descriptions that survived in public libraries. but detailed technical specifications for what the Greeks had called cosmothiads, cosmic doorways. Ibn Rushd's private notes, found centuries later in Fez, describe maps showing cave systems that connected Mediterranean locations with sites in distant Asia and the Americas continents that Islamic geography hadn't yet acknowledged. But these weren't conventional maps. They included temporal coordinates, indicating that the passages connected different periods as well as different places. The Greek explorers had apparently developed navigation methods for underground routes that existed outside normal space-time. The technical specifications were even more disturbing. The texts describe procedures for artificially expanding natural cave openings using acoustic resonance techniques that could destabilize dimensional barriers. They included detailed warnings about entities that inhabited parallel dimensions accessible through modified caves, and emergency protocols for sealing passages that had become infected with predatory intelligences from other worlds. Ibn Rushd correspondence with fellow scholars reveals his growing obsession with locating additional fragments that might complete the technical manuals. But his letters also document increasing paranoia about surveillance by authorities, who seemed determined to prevent reconstruction of ancient underground technologies. European crusaders brought back similar fragments from conquests in the Holy Land. The Knights Templars' secret archives, briefly accessible during their persecution in 1307, purportedly contained scrolls acquired from beneath Solomon's Temple, describing underground networks that connected Jerusalem with sacred sites throughout the known world. Templar confessions extracted under torture included references to the maps of the first kings that showed passages leading to the realm where gold grows like plants and time moves backward. But the Templars had apparently learned the same lessons that had destroyed earlier civilizations. Their final Grand Master, Jacques de Mont, allegedly destroyed the most complete map collections before his execution, claiming that the knowledge was too heavy for mortal minds to bear without corruption. Surviving Templar documents, hidden in Swiss archives, describe elaborate security protocols that the Knights had developed for handling interdimensional navigation materials. Maps were never kept complete in single locations. Technical specifications were encoded using symbolic languages that required multiple keys for decryption, and geographical coordinates were deliberately altered using mathematical formulas that only initiated members could. Reverse these security measures suggests that the Templars had gained direct experience with the dangers of unlimited access to interdimensional passage. Maps. Renaissance exploration brought new discoveries and new suppression efforts. Christopher Columbus's private logs, distinct from the official voyage records, describe encounters with Caribbean natives who possessed detailed knowledge of underground passages connecting islands across hundreds of miles of ocean. The natives showed Columbus cave systems that contained what he described as chambers larger than cathedrals, though the hills above them be no bigger than houses. Columbus attempted to acquire native maps showing these underground connections, but Spanish colonial authorities classified his findings immediately upon his return to Europe. Subsequent expeditions focused on eliminating native knowledge of cave systems rather than exploiting them, suggesting that early exploration had produced results that colonial powers considered too dangerous for exploitation. Similar suppression efforts occurred throughout European colonial expansion in Peru. Spanish conquistadors discovered that Incan priests possessed codices describing underground routes connecting sacred sites throughout the Andes Mountains. But rather than confiscating these materials for strategic advantage, Spanish authorities made destroying them a priority. Colonial records describe elaborate auto de fe ceremonies, where Incan geographical materials were burned alongside religious artifacts, as if geographical knowledge posed equivalent theological threats. The few Incan maps that survived Spanish destruction efforts were hidden by indigenous peoples in remote mountain caches. Modern archaeological expeditions continue to discover these hidden collections, often finding maps that accurately describe cave systems unknown to contemporary spell. But the maps include warnings written in Quechua that translate roughly as paths that should remain unwalked in doors that must stay closed until the sun dies. The Vatican accumulated perhaps the most extensive collection of interdimensional navigation materials. Papal archives contain geographical materials confiscated from across Catholic territories during the Counter-Reformation. These include cave maps from Celtic monasteries, underground passage charts from Germanic tribes, and technical specifications acquired during the suppression of various mystical orders. But Vatican catalogues indicate that the most dangerous materials were never housed in Rome itself, but distributed among isolated monasteries with specific security protocols. The Jesuit order developed particular expertise in locating and securing interdimensional passage materials during their missionary activities worldwide. Jesuit reports from Asia, Africa, and the Americas consistently describe encounters with indigenous peoples who possessed knowledge of underground routes connecting distant locations through non-Euclidean geometries, but Jesuit procedures focused on containment rather than exploitation. Their archives describe elaborate protocols for identifying, cataloging, and securing interdimensional materials while preventing any single individual or institution from accessing complete technical specifications. The Jesuits had apparently recognized that the knowledge was inherently corrupting that prolonged exposure to interdimensional navigation materials produced psychological changes that made rational decision-making impossible. Modern intelligence agencies inherited these suppression traditions during World War II. Both Allied and Axis forces conducted classified expeditions seeking ancient maps that might provide strategic advantages through interdimensional passage access. Nazi Ahnenerbe expeditions to Tibet and Peru specifically targeted indigenous collections of cave navigation materials, while Allied intelligence worked to prevent Axis acquisition of complete technical specifications. Post-war classified documents suggest that both sides discovered enough to recognize the dangers that had motivated centuries of suppression efforts. Cold War intelligence operations included programs designed to locate and secure interdimensional materials, but with emphasis on preventing exploitation by any nation rather than developing them for strategic advantage. The pattern across centuries remains consistent. Civilizations repeatedly discover ancient materials describing interdimensional passage technologies, attempt to exploit them for advantage, then recognize the dangers and implement suppression protocols to prevent future exploitation. That every empire that has gained access to complete interdimensional navigation materials has either destroyed them voluntarily or been destroyed by their consequences. But suppression has never been completely successful. Fragments continue to surface in private collections, black market antiquities trades, and archaeological discoveries. Digital networks now allow global coordination between researchers attempting to reconstruct complete technical specifications from scattered fragments, the knowledge that ancient peoples worked desperately to scatter and hide is being reassembled by modern scholars who lack the historical context to understand why it was hidden in the first place. The maps exist, scattered across continents and centuries, waiting for someone to piece together the complete picture of where the passages lead and why our ancestors concluded that some doors between worlds must never be opened. The question is whether modern civilization will repeat ancient mistakes or learn from them before it's too late to close passages that were sealed for humanity's protection. Dr. Sarah Chen first noticed the anomaly during routine seismic monitoring near California's Mammoth Cave system in 2019. Her instruments detected acoustic signatures that violated fundamental principles of wave propagation sounds that appeared to originate from sources located several kilometers below the deepest known cave formations, yet reached surface monitoring stations faster than acoustic waves should travel through solid rock. Chun's initial assumption was equipment malfunction, but verification using multiple instrument arrays confirmed the impossible readings. Sound waves were somehow bypassing the intervening rock layers entirely, suggesting the existence of propagation mechanisms that current physics couldn't explain. Her classified report to the National Science Foundation would mark the beginning of serious scientific investigation into phenomena that ancient peoples had documented for millennia, anomalies associated with specific cave systems that challenged conventional understanding of spatial relationships and energy conservation. Laws. Quantum mechanics had already established that reality operated according to principles that defied intuitive understanding. Particles could exist in multiple states simultaneously, influence each other across arbitrary distances instantaneously, and tunnel through energy barriers that classical physics deemed impenetrable. But cave-related anomalies suggested that these quantum effects might scale up to macroscopic systems under specific geological conditions. Dr. Mikhail Volkov's team at CERN developed theoretical frameworks for understanding how cave systems might function as naturally occurring dimensional interfaces. Work with particle accelerators had demonstrated that high-energy collisions could create microscopic tears in space-time brief openings into higher dimensional spaces that existed parallel to observable reality. His calculations suggested that specific geological formations might concentrate natural energy fields to levels sufficient for creating stable macroscopic dimensional interfaces, caves meeting certain criteria-specific mineral compositions, particular electromagnetic signatures, and precise geometric configurations could theoretically function as permanent gateways between parallel dimensional spaces. The mathematical models were elegant, but they predicted phenomena that mainstream physics wasn't prepared to acknowledge. Volkov's theoretical work gained credibility when independent research teams began documenting electromagnetic anomalies in cave systems worldwide. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's expedition to Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula used ground-penetrating radar to map cenote systems that the Maya had considered sacred. Her instruments detected electromagnetic signatures consistent with Volkov's dimensional interface, predictions energy patterns that suggested the cenotes were accessing power sources located outside three-dimensional space. Rodriguez's team also documented temporal anomalies that defied conventional physics. Atomic clocks, synchronized at surface level, showed increasing divergence as they were lowered into specific cenote systems, with some clocks gaining time while others lost it. The effect suggested that time itself flowed differently at various depths, as if the cenotes accessed regions where temporal mechanics operated according to different laws. But the most disturbing discoveries came from attempts to map cenote systems using conventional surveying techniques. Laser measurement devices produced readings indicating that internal chamber dimensions exceeded the physical size. Constraints imposed by surrounding geology. Rooms appeared to be larger inside than outside, suggesting that the caves accessed spatial dimensions that existed independent of local 3D constraints. Dr. James Morrison's research at Edinburgh University focused on magnetic field anomalies associated with Scottish cave systems. Morrison's team documented magnetic signatures near Highland caves that indicated the presence of materials with impossible property substances that appeared to generate magnetic fields without corresponding electrical currents, violating Maxwell's equations governing electromagnetic relationships. Spectrographic analysis of air samples taken from these caves revealed trace elements that shouldn't exist in stable form under terrestrial conditions. More significantly, Morrison's instruments detected gravitational anomalies near cave entrances marked by ancient Pictish symbols. Precision gravimeters indicated variations in local gravitational field strength that suggested the caves accessed regions where different physical constants applied. Objects dropped into specific caves fell faster or slower than Earth's gravitational acceleration predicted, as if they were entering zones where gravity operated. According to alternative mathematical relationships, Morrison's classified reports to the Ministry of Defense described discovering cave systems that appeared to violate conservation of energy laws. Thermal imaging revealed cave passages that maintained constant temperatures despite having no apparent heat sources, and others that showed temperature gradients that required more energy than geological processes could provide. Dr. Kenji Nakamura's team in Japan developed instrumentation specifically designed to measure dimensional interface effects. Nakamura's research built on string theory predictions that reality consisted of multiple parallel dimensions separated by energy barriers that prevented normal matter from transitioning between dimensional spaces. But his calculations suggested that specific combinations of electromagnetic fields, gravitational anomalies, and geometric configurations could create stable passages through these barriers. Japanese cave systems provided ideal testing environments for Nakamura's theories. Instruments deployed in caves beneath Mount Fuji detected energy signatures consistent with interdimensional interface activity patterns that suggested local reality was being influenced by processes occurring in parallel dimensional spaces. Nakamura's team also documented biological anomalies that supported interdimensional interface theories. Living organisms exposed to cave environments with strong interface signatures showed genetic mutations that occurred far too rapidly for conventional evolutionary processes. The mutations appeared to represent adaptations to environmental conditions that didn't exist in terrestrial environments, suggesting that the organisms were being influenced by selective pressures from parallel dimensions. Dr. Amanda Foster's work at MIT focused on developing technological applications for dimensional interface effects. Foster's research team investigated whether cave-related anomalies could be artificially reproduced using controlled electromagnetic field generation. Their experiments succeeded in creating microscopic dimensional interfaces in laboratory conditions, producing effects similar to those documented in natural cave systems, but on much smaller scales. The technological implications were staggering. Stable dimensional interfaces could provide access to unlimited energy sources, instantaneous communication across arbitrary distances, and transportation methods that bypassed conventional space-time limitations. But Foster's experiments also revealed why ancient civilizations had eventually abandoned technologies. Prolonged exposure to dimensional interface effects produced unpredictable changes in living organisms. Test subjects exposed to artificial interfaces showed enhanced cognitive abilities, but also developed psychological conditions that made rational decision-making increasingly difficult. Subjects reported receiving information from sources they couldn't identify, experiencing memories of events that hadn't occurred in baseline reality, and gradually losing the ability to distinguish between thoughts originating in their own minds versus information being transmitted from parallel dimensions. Foster's classified reports to the Department of Defense concluded that dimensional interface technology was inherently unstable for biological organisms evolved in single-dimensional environments. The human nervous system wasn't equipped to process information from multiple dimensional sources simultaneously without suffering progressive psychological deterioration. Dr. Robert Hayes's team at Los Alamos investigated the military applications and dangers of dimensional interface technology. Hayes's research focused on understanding why civilizations throughout history had developed dimensional interface technologies, then systematically abandoned or destroyed them. Historical analysis suggested that societies achieving advanced interdimensional capabilities invariably experienced rapid collapse, often leaving behind evidence of desperate attempts to seal dimensional interfaces permanently. Computer modeling of interdimensional interface effects revealed potential explanations for this historical pattern. Stable dimensional interfaces didn't simply provide access to parallel dimensions. They created permanent connections that allowed influences from parallel realities to affect baseline dimensional spaces. Civilizations that opened to many interfaces simultaneously, or created interfaces without proper containment protocols, effectively merged their reality with parallel dimensions where different physical laws and hostile intelligences operated. Hayes's team concluded that dimensional interface technology represented an evolutionary filter, developmental threshold that civilizations either navigated successfully by maintaining strict limitations on interface creation, or failed to survive due to uncontrolled dimensional contamination. The implications were clear. Cave systems weren't just natural curiosities or ancient religious sites. They were potentially active dimensional interfaces that could provide access to transformative technologies or catastrophic contamination, depending on how they were approached. Modern science had finally developed theoretical frameworks for understanding phenomena that ancient peoples had documented through direct experience. But scientific understanding also confirmed why those ancient peoples had concluded that some knowledge was too dangerous to preserve without extreme caution. The caves were real, interdimensional interfaces, and the entities our ancestors had encountered in those depths weren't hallucinations or mythological constructs. They were intelligences from parallel dimensions, offering humanity the same choices they had offered every previous civilization: transcendence through dimensional integration, or survival through dimensional isolation. the choice remained the same. But now we understood exactly what we were choosing between. The last transmission from Dr. Michael Howard's expedition came through at 3:47 a.m. on December 15, 2018, crackling with static from somewhere deep beneath Utah's Uinta Mountains. His voice, normally steady and professional, carried an edge of barely controlled panic. Base camp, we've found the source of the electromagnetic readings. It's not geological. Repeat, this is not a geological formation. Something is responding to our presence. Collins and Jong they're not acting like themselves anymore. We're sealing the passage and returning to surface immediately. The team never emerged. Search and rescue operations found their camp intact. Equipment neatly arranged as if they had planned to return momentarily. But the cave entrance they had been exploring was blocked by rockfall that geological analysis indicated had occurred from inside the cave. System as if something had deliberately sealed the passages from within. Howard's expedition wasn't unique. Since 2010, 17 officially documented spelunking expeditions have vanished in cave systems worldwide, leaving behind equipment, detailed logs documenting normal exploration activities, and no trace of what happened to the explorers themselves. The pattern always follows the same progression. Experienced teams entering caves with sophisticated equipment and safety protocols. Routine progress reports documenting standard geological features. Then sudden communication blackouts, followed by evidence of deliberate abandonment or sealing of passages. From inside the cave systems, the Kaufman incident in Carpathian Mountains established protocols that modern cave rescue operations still follow. In 2013, American entrepreneur David Kaufman funded a private expedition to investigate electromagnetic anomalies in caves beneath Bran Castle. His team included former Special Forces personnel, professional speleologists, and scientists with security clearances. Equipped with military-grade communication, equipment, and emergency extraction protocols, Kaufman's team maintained regular contact during initial exploration phases, documenting cave formations that matched historical descriptions found in classified Romanian government archives. Their reports described passages that extended far deeper than geological surveys indicated possible, and chambers with architectural features that suggested human construction using unknown techniques. The team's final transmission included video footage that Romanian authorities immediately classified. The footage allegedly shows team members exhibiting behavioral changes, consistent with psychological influence by unknown external factors. Military analysis of the video identified what intelligence specialists termed coordinated nonverbal communication patterns the team members appeared to be responding to information sources not visible in the footage. Subsequent investigation revealed that the cave system contained chambers decorated with symbols, matching those found at archaeological sites throughout Eastern Europe, sites where previous expeditions had also vanished under similar circumstances. Romanian government archives, declassified under pressure from international investigators, contained references to containment protocols dating back to Soviet occupation, suggesting that Eastern European authorities had been tracking cave-related disappearances for decades. The Thai cave incident brought international attention to systematic suppression of cave exploration data in 2019. 3 months after the celebrated rescue of the Wild Boars soccer team from Tham Luang Cave, a joint Australian-Thai geological survey team disappeared while mapping additional passages in the same cave system. Official reports described the team as lost due to equipment failure during routine surveying operations, but leaked communications revealed more disturbing circumstances. The geological team had been investigating electromagnetic readings that appeared during the soccer team rescue but were never publicly reported. The readings indicated artificial power sources operating deep within the cave system, sources that couldn't be accounted for by known electrical installations or natural phenomena. Thai military communications, obtained by investigative journalists, described the geological team's reports of discovering chambers containing technology that they couldn't identify or understand. The team's final messages referenced attempts to photograph the technology, but their equipment apparently suffered systematic failures that prevented documentation. Subsequent examination of the cave system by international rescue teams found no trace of the geological expedition, but did discover that several passages explored during the soccer team rescue had been sealed using techniques that Thai authorities couldn't explain or replicate. The Siberian expedition revealed the global scope of coordinated suppression efforts. Russian oligarch Dmitry Volkov funded a private expedition to investigate cave systems in the Ural Mountains where Soviet-era documents indicated discovery of strategic materials of unknown origin. The 2020 expedition included former Spetsnaz operatives and scientists with experience in classified weapons research. Volkov's team transmitted regular progress reports documenting cave formations that contained metallic deposits with properties that defied conventional materials science. Chemical analysis indicated that the deposits consisted of elements that existed in stable isotopic forms not found in terrestrial environments, suggesting either advanced artificial synthesis or extraterrestrial origins. The expedition's final transmission described discovering chambers containing what team leader Colonel Boris Fedorov termed operational installations, machinery that appeared to be actively functioning despite having no apparent power sources or maintenance infrastructure. Fedorov reported that team members who approached the machinery closely experienced rapid onset psychological effects, including enhanced pattern recognition capabilities, but diminished ability to follow previously established safety protocols. Russian Federation authorities responded to the expedition's disappearance by declaring the entire region a military exclusion zone and deploying chemical warfare specialists to conduct environmental safety assessments. International monitoring agencies detected atmospheric releases consistent with underground detonation of chemical agents, suggesting that Russian authorities had deliberately destroyed the cave system rather than risk further exposure to whatever the expedition had discovered. American incidents revealed similar patterns of official suppression and cover. Up. The 2021 Mammoth Cave incident involved a National Geographic expedition that had received unprecedented access to unexplored sections of Kentucky's cave system. The expedition included documentary filmmakers whose footage would have provided public documentation of cave exploration procedures and discoveries. The team's preliminary reports described finding passages that contained carved symbols, matching those documented at other sites where expeditions had disappeared, but more significantly, they reported discovering chambers with acoustic properties that allowed sound transmission across distances that exceeded the physical dimensions of the cave. System.Team Communications described experiments with sound generation that produced responses from sources located in areas of the cave system that were confirmed to be inaccessible or non-existent according to geological surveys. The acoustic responses followed patterns that suggested intelligent source rather than natural echo effects. The expedition vanished during attempts to locate the source of the acoustic responses. National Park Service reports attributed their disappearance to flash flooding despite weather conditions that made flooding impossible. Subsequent investigation revealed that several sections of Mammoth Cave had been permanently sealed using explosives, with official justification citing structural safety concerns. The Australian Blue Mountains incident demonstrated international coordination of suppression efforts. In 2022, a joint university research expedition investigating Aboriginal cave sites in New South Wales disappeared while documenting petroglyphs that local Aboriginal communities had specifically warned them to avoid. The Aboriginal guides had refused to accompany the researchers into certain caves, describing them as sorry places where the ancestors still walk. The research team's equipment was recovered from cave entrances, but forensic analysis indicated that the gear had been carefully arranged rather than abandoned in emergency situations. More disturbing, the equipment included documentation of petroglyphs that perfectly matched symbols found at cave sites worldwide where previous expeditions had vanished. Australian authorities classified the research materials immediately, but leaked documents revealed that the petroglyphs included detailed geographical information about cave systems that modern geological surveys hadn't yet mapped. The Aboriginal petroglyphs apparently contained technical specifications for navigating underground passages that shouldn't exist according to contemporary geological understanding. The consistency across incidents suggests systematic global suppression of cave exploration activities that encounter specific phenomena. Government authorities worldwide appear to be implementing identical protocols for containing cave-related incidents, despite the lack of public acknowledgement that such protocols exist. Modern cave explorers are vanishing at increasing rates as advanced technology allows deeper penetration into cave systems that previous civilizations had deliberately sealed. Each disappearance follows the same pattern: routine exploration, discovery of anomalous phenomena, behavioral changes in team members, then systematic elimination of evidence. The question is no longer whether caves contain dangerous phenomena, but whether authorities worldwide are coordinating suppression efforts to prevent public awareness of discoveries that challenge fundamental assumptions about reality. The caves are reclaiming those who venture too deep, and someone is ensuring that their warnings never reach the surface. When Howard Carter first broke through the sealed doorway to Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he ignored the hieroglyphic warning carved above the entrance. Death comes on wings to he who enters the tomb of a pharaoh within 7 years. 12 members of Carter's excavation team had died under circumstances that defied medical explanation: heart failures in healthy men, sudden onset cancers, and accidents so unlikely that insurance companies refused to classify them as coincidental. But Carter's team hadn't just opened a burial chamber. Recent analysis of tomb construction reveals that the burial site was built above a natural cave system that the ancient Egyptians had deliberately sealed using techniques that modern engineering still can't replicate. The curse wasn't supernatural. Vengeance, it was a containment failure. Egyptian tomb builders had developed elaborate protocols for constructing burial sites that would prevent disturbance of underground entities that they believed guarded passages between worlds. The hieroglyphic warnings weren't threats against grave robbers. They were technical safety notifications describing hazards associated with breaching barriers that contained interdimensional phenomena. Papyrus documents discovered in private collections describe Egyptian curse formulas as operational procedures for reinforcing spiritual barriers around underground sites. The formulas included specific acoustic frequencies, chemical compounds derived from rare minerals, and geometric configurations that created what the Egyptians termed fields, zones of dimensional stability that prevented interdimensional entities from influencing surface reality. The technology was inherited from earlier civilizations that had learned through catastrophic experience that certain underground entities required permanent containment. Mesopotamian curse tablets provide even more explicit technical details about interdimensional containment procedures. Akkadian cuneiform texts describe elaborate rituals performed by priests called mashmash, literally guardianculas, who specialized in maintaining barriers around cave systems that contained what they termed galu, demons. But these weren't supernatural entities. They were intelligences from parallel dimensions that could influence surface reality through specific types of cave systems. The mashmash developed detailed protocols for detecting dimensional interface failures and emergency procedures for re-establishing containment when barriers were compromised. Their curse formulas were technical manuals disguised as religious incantations, describing specific acoustic frequencies, mineral compounds, and geometric configurations required to restore dimensional stability around compromised cave systems. Babylonian astronomical texts reveal that these containment procedures were coordinated with celestial events that affected dimensional barrier stability. The priests tracked planetary alignments that weakened interdimensional barriers and intensified containment protocols during periods when dimensional interfaces were most likely to fail. Greek mystery schools inherited and refined these interdimensional containment technologies. The Orphic hymns, typically interpreted as religious poetry, actually contained technical specifications for what the Greeks called catabasis-controlled descent into underworld realms. But the hymns also include detailed warning protocols for detecting when underworld entities were attempting to influence surface reality through compromised cave systems. Greek oracles weren't mystical prophets, but trained technicians who monitored dimensional interface sites for signs of containment failure. The famous Oracle of Delphi was positioned above a cave system where geological conditions created natural dimensional interfaces, and the oracle's prophecies were actually status reports on interdimensional barrier stability. When barriers weakened, the oracles issued warnings disguised as prophecies, mobilizing resources to reinforce containment before dimensional entities could establish permanent influence in surface reality. The cryptic language of ancient prophecies served as coded technical communications that prevented public panic while coordinating emergency response among initiated personnel. Celtic druids developed perhaps the most sophisticated guardian systems for protecting barrier sites. Irish and Scottish stone circles weren't astronomical observatories but technical installations designed to monitor and reinforce dimensional barriers around cave systems. The stones were positioned according to precise geometric formulas that created acoustic resonance patterns capable of detecting dimensional interface fluctuations. Druidic oral traditions, preserved in isolated communities throughout Ireland and Scotland, describe elaborate hierarchies of guardian families responsible for maintaining specific barrier sites. These families inherited technical knowledge about dimensional containment procedures and were bound by elaborate oath systems that made revealing containment protocols to outsiders punishable by death. Archaeological evidence suggests that Celtic guardian systems remained operational well into the medieval period. Stone circles throughout Britain and Ireland show evidence of regular maintenance and modification, indicating continuous technical operation rather than abandoned religious sites. The Celtic guardians developed early warning systems that could detect dimensional interface failures across hundreds of miles. Standing stones throughout Celtic territories were positioned to create communication networks using acoustic resonance effects, allowing rapid coordination of containment responses. When barriers were compromised, Native American tribal systems reveal similar guardian traditions throughout the Western Hemisphere. Hopi oral traditions describe clan responsibilities for maintaining cyberdimensional interface sites that connected the current world with previous worlds that had been destroyed by interdimensional contamination. The Hopi developed elaborate ceremonial cycles designed to reinforce dimensional barriers during periods when astronomical conditions weakened containment. Effectiveness. Hopi prophecies, like Greek oracles, weren't mystical predictions, but technical status reports on dimensional barrier integrity. The prophecies described specific signs that indicated approaching containment failures and mobilized tribal resources for emergency reinforcement procedures. Similar systems existed throughout North America. Cherokee traditions describe nightland guardians responsible for maintaining barriers around cave systems where interdimensional entities dwelt. Lakota oral histories reference warrior societies dedicated to preventing unauthorized access to cave systems that could serve as dimensional interface points. Archaeological evidence suggests that these Native American guardian systems were designed to coordinate with similar systems operated by civilizations throughout the Americas. Stone monuments and earthwork formations from Alaska to Argentina follow geometric patterns that suggest continent-wide communication networks for monitoring dimensional barrier integrity. Modern investigation has confirmed the technical sophistication of ancient guardian systems. Electromagnetic surveys of stone circle sites throughout Europe reveal that the monuments create measurable effects on local electromagnetic fields. The stone arrangements generate standing wave patterns that could theoretically detect fluctuations in dimensional barrier stability using the same principles that modern physics predicts for an interdimensional interface. Monitoring. Acoustic analysis of Native American ceremonial sites reveals similar technical sophistication. Sites like Chaco Canyon and Cahokia were positioned and constructed to create acoustic effects that could detect underground activity across vast distances. The ceremonial cycles performed at these sites used sound frequencies that matched those predicted by theoretical physics for interdimensional barrier reinforcement procedures. Chemical analysis of soil samples from guardian sites worldwide reveals trace elements that don't occur naturally in local geology. These elements appear to be residues from compounds that were regularly applied to reinforce dimensional barriers using techniques that combined advanced chemistry with acoustic and electromagnetic effects. The guardian traditions weren't religious superstitions. but technical maintenance systems operated by civilizations that had direct experience with the consequences of dimensional barrier failures. Every major civilization developed guardian hierarchies responsible for monitoring and maintaining dimensional barriers around cave systems. The guardians used technologies that combined acoustic, electromagnetic, and chemical effects to detect and prevent interdimensional contamination of surface reality. The consistency of guardian systems across isolated cultures suggests that they were all responding to the same underlying technological requirements. Dimensional interfaces required constant monitoring and periodic reinforcement to prevent catastrophic failures that could contaminate surface reality with influences from parallel dimensions where hostile intelligences operated. Modern civilization has abandoned these guardian systems without understanding their technical function, systematically dismantling containment installations that previous civilizations had maintained for millennia. The curses weren't supernatural threats, but technical warnings about hazards that still exist. The guardians weren't religious officials, but trained technicians maintaining systems that prevented interdimensional contamination, and the barriers they maintained are failing one by one as modern development disturbs sites that our ancestors knew must never be left unguarded.